Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Singapore Injustice Podcast. I'm one of the co hosts, Kush, and this is Max, and today we're going to be taking a brief look into some of the injustices in Singapore for this series.
In this topic, let's get into some of the. I mean, there's obviously not a lot of CAS opportunities for this in particular, but we talked about some last podcast, so this time we're going to talk about some things we can do to make some things that we can do proactively to keep in mind while online, because I'm assuming, I mean, obviously this episode is going to be a bit more about the online things that we can do.
Because COVID-19 has restricted movements.
Yeah, so it's
So,
actually so much. It actually makes a lot of sense because COVID-19. Now we're all growing online, especially these past. I'd say almost a year now, which
It
is
feels like a year. It's not almost a year. It's only October, so
yeah.
it's like 9 months, 8 months. No, 8 to
Started
7,
in
8,
like
7,
March,
8 months.
right?
Exactly. So, yeah. So I think that for CAS opportunities, this topic of racism is pretty. It doesn't really apply. However, I can say that both. If you, I think that the CAS opportunities for like surrounding migrant workers,
Yeah,
they still
them-
exist. They are the ones that I mentioned last time.
Yeah,
Although not directly related to this racism topic, I think that they might be indirectly related, and I think that they're still good to mention. But also, aside from like CAS opportunities, I think that one of the things that we should all strive to do is just more mindfulness. So
Yeah.
think about what is a choice and what is what is controlled and what is uncontrolled.
Yeah, and like obviously everything that you do that is good for the community this couple of years, it doesn't have to be CAS. Like there's so much that you can do that doesn't necessarily translate into being CAS, but it actually means a lot for our communities, and especially when online, it's really important to, like, especially these couple months we've also been seeing some racial injustice come into our social medias, and when and we have to keep in mind that we have to be as respectful as possible, and it's not a CAS thing to do, but when you're online it's really important to make sure that you're not being controversial, that
Not
I
being
guess
racist.
yeah, not being racist. That
Not being mean or disrespectful to anyone.
exactly.
And that's just, it's a general. It should be, and I hope that this story and this podcast, in a way, shows you how even saying something that you might not even think is racist or might not even think is derogatory or mean to any group of people might be mean or derogatory or racist to any group of people. I think that hopefully this podcast and this story that I just explained helps all the listeners to this podcast realize that racism exists even in the controlled society we live in Singapore. That racism doesn't care where you come from, racism doesn't care where you post it or where you spread it. I think that racism will always catch up to anyone that engages in it.
Yeah, and in like our sheltered environment for us international school students, like obviously we've heard it time and time again about being respectful online, all the digital literacy lessons we've had, but and obviously even I have these thoughts where, I've heard it so many times I don't want to hear it again, but you have to understand how important it is, especially in our lives at this stage where whatever you say online, it will stay there forever. There is nothing that you can delete off the internet, and in the future, if anyone comes across like things you've done in like 10 years ago,
Exactly.
if someone comes across
some-
it, it's horrible.
If for any reason being racist isn't enough of a discourager of this behavior,
Yeah.
then keep in mind that universities and job applications and like checkups like those, they do go through your internet history
Exactly.
and your accounts and what you've said to see if you've been engaging in things like this exactly. So it's important to remember that if being racist isn't enough of a discourager, which I doubt it isn't, that it's also important just because for digital like etiquette
Yeah.
and digital and because nothing is ever deleted online. It's crucial to remember that you might be held accountable even 5 or 10 or 30 years after it's been done.
Yeah, and it's becoming more and more common, especially in like one of the biggest examples we have today of this culture, like the cancel culture, is on YouTube, where creators that have done some offensive skits like 10 years ago are now facing the consequences. And I mean, it's a whole other argument whether cancel culture should be a thing, but like, just
It
stay
definitely has
respectful all
something
the
to do with
time.
each other. It definitely has something to do because we see like many like internet personalities that get held accountable for things that they did a while ago. Whether or not that is right and just, I'm not going to get into, but it happens, and that's all that we need to communicate to the listeners because it happens, and we all need to take charge to make sure that we don't get put in a position that we are held accountable for something that's racist or disrespectful to others online.
Exactly.